The polls are establishing a clear trend towards the Liberal National Coalition, and the release of the Nielsen poll in May showed that once again many in the media are somewhat out of touch. You have to remember that most of the media, certainly the political media, the gallery, campaigned and endorsed for a return of the Rudd government. And they subjected the Rudd government to nothing like the rigorous, robust examination that they did of the Howard government. And yet the incompetence, the problems of the Rudd government were very serious. Nothing like this happened under the Howard government. There was nothing like, for example, the rorts under the building the education revolution, where it is claimed that almost a third of the $16 billion stimulus package has been lost, that we haven't had value for money. Then of course we've seen the roofing insulation program, which was an absolute disaster, which led to fires and deaths, where the government has shown itself incompetent even in correcting that. And there have been other instances, for example the broadband proposal, which is based on back-of-the-envelope calculations, which apparently will, if it is implemented, never make a profit. As the Australian said when Ms Gillard finally announced an investigation into the BER program to see if we were getting value for money, to see if there were any problems, which she still denies, the Australian editorialised that many readers of the Fairfax newspapers and listeners and viewers to the ABC would have been surprised, because they would have wondered why it was necessary to have such an investigation. This was the investigation of the BER program in the media seemed to be restricted to the Australian and radio station 2GB, particularly Ray Hadley. So the media have been seriously at fault in not playing the role they should be playing in relation to subjecting the Rudd government to proper analysis, to proper rigorous and robust reporting, as they did the Howard government. Nobody complains that they did this to the Howard government. They should have done this to the Rudd government. But even with the polls, they're still showing their weaknesses. Remember, at the time of the ETS, the gallery, or most in the gallery, predicted that if the Liberals under Malcolm Turnbull didn't go along and support the ETS and support the legislation before Copenhagen, that the Liberal Party would be massacred in the coming election. Well, of course, it's a fact that had Senator Minchin and Tony Abbott and others not rebelled against this and taken the leadership of the Liberal Party and rejected the ETS, the Liberal Party would not be, the coalition would not be in the firm and rising position it is now. And yet, when, for example, the Sydney Morning Herald announced that the Nielsen poll in May was showing that the Labour Party would be defeated, they also announced in their headlines that Tony Abbott was a liability, some liability. Had it not been for Tony Abbott, the coalition would not be in the position it is now. The second weakness of the media is attempting to suggest that all of the faults of the Rudd government are the faults of the Prime Minister alone. They're the faults of the Kitchen Cabinet. the so-called kitchen cabinet, Mr. Rudd, Mr. Swan, Miss Gillard, and Mr. Tanner. This Politburo has taken responsibility for every decision. Miss Gillard has presided over the most incompetently organised programme in the history of this nation. It's not much good having an investigation now when most of the money has been distributed. What Miss Gillard should have done was set in place those conditions which would have ensured that these votes did not take place. The Politburo of Rudd, Swan, Tanner and Gillard are just as guilty of all these things. It's no good the media pretending that Miss Gillard is some popular person who will take over the leadership of the Labour Party and everything will be smooth sailing thereafter. And the final failing of the media is in relation to asylum seekers. Even the more level-headed members of the media seem to have a failing and not realise what the Australian people feel in relation to asylum seekers. The general public sees them, those arriving in the boats, at the present stage, since they're not coming directly from a place of where they have been treated badly. They've usually come from Indonesia. The Australian public sees them as queue jumpers who are costing a lot of money and getting ahead of people who've waited properly to come to Australia. Even on the Saturday agenda, where Peter Van Onselen interviewed some journalists, and on the Insiders on Sunday, after the announcement of the new opposition policy, the general view was, and this was reflected in so much of the media, that Mr. Abbott and the coalition were going down the wrong path, that they were out of touch. Well, the Nielsen poll in May shows that the media, the gallery, is out of touch. The people by two-thirds, almost two-thirds, support the coalition policy. It's the media who are out of touch, who don't realise what are the opinions of the rank and file Australians. So as we lead up to the election, the media should try to engage more in reporting what is happening rather than trying to apply their own left-of-centre agenda.